The first thing I heard was the silence where my life used to be. Not the quiet of a peaceful morning, the kind that promises dew on the grass and a gentle sunrise, but the hollow, ringing silence of a void. It pressed in on my ears, a physical weight. My bank account, the one that held every dime of my 35 years of work as a school librarian, my pension, my security, my future, was empty. $0 and 0 cents. The numbers on the screen were a stark, brutal epitaph for the life I thought I had, glowing an insolent green in the dim light of my kitchen. I gripped the edge of my kitchen counter, the cold laminate seeping into my skin. The only real thing in a world that had suddenly tilted off its axis and sent me spinning into nothingness. It had to be a mistake, a system glitch, a ghost in the machine. But a cold dread, sharp and acidic, was already climbing up my throat, a taste like bile and fear. Deep down, in that secret, honest place inside a mother's heart, I knew. I knew who had done this. I just couldn't bear to let the thought form completely. My son, Mark, my only child, the boy I had raised to be a good man, the one who held my hand at his father's funeral and promised to always look after me. And his new wife, Chloe. The woman with a smile as bright and hard as a diamond, whose eyes never seemed to smile with her mouth. My hands trembled so violently I could barely dial his number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, each ring a hammer blow against my fragile, dissolving hope. When he finally answered, his voice was tight, wound up like a spring. "Mom? Is everything okay?" he asked, and the false, brittle innocence in his tone shattered the last shard of my denial. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A strange, glacial calm settled over me. My voice, when it came out, was a stranger's, thin and chillingly level. "The money is gone, Mark. My entire pension. It's all gone." The silence on his end was my answer. It wasn't a pause of confusion. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of guilt. It was a confession, a guilty plea, and a betrayal all wrapped in one devastating moment of dead air. Where are you watching this story from? Let me know in the comments. And be sure to subscribe to the channel, because I promise you, the truth behind the missing money is darker and more twisted than you can possibly imagine. "I can explain, Mom," he finally stammered, the words tumbling out in a clumsy, panicked rush. "It's an investment. Chloe. She has this amazing idea for an online boutique. High-end fashion. It's a sure thing, guaranteed returns. The money isn't gone, it's just working for us. For all of us." His words were meant to be reassuring, but they felt like stones hitting my face, each one leaving a fresh bruise on my soul. He hadn't asked. He hadn't discussed it. He and his wife, a woman I'd known for less than a year, had taken the sum total of my life's labor and gambled it on a dream that wasn't mine. He had handed my future to her like a party favor. "You'll get it all back, Mom." With interest, he insisted, his voice cracking with a desperation I now recognized as the sound of a weak man drowning in his own choices. "Chloe is so smart about these things. You just have to trust us." Trust. The word was a mockery. Trust was the bedrock of our family, and he had just dynamited it to rubble. I looked around my small, tidy house, the house my late husband, Richard, and I had bought 40 years ago with a down payment we'd saved for a decade. Every photograph on the wall, every worn spot on the armchair where Richard used to sit, was a testament to a life built on trust and sacrifice. A life Mark had just devalued to $0 and 0 cents. I ended the call without another word. The silence that returned was heavier now, filled with the ghosts of broken promises and unspoken lies. My mind flashed back to the last family dinner, just a week ago. Chloe, sitting across from me, her hand resting possessively on Mark's arm, her painted nails digging slightly into his sleeve. She'd looked at me, her eyes sparkling with a feverish light, and said, "We have such exciting plans, Alara. We're going to make this family proud." At the time, I'd thought it was ambition, the eager energy of a newlywed. Now I saw it for what it was. A threat. She wasn't just marrying my son. She was staging a takeover. And my quiet, timid grandson, Leo, had been watching her that night, his young face unreadable from behind his glasses, his eyes missing nothing. I didn't know it then, but in his silence, a different kind of storm was gathering. The days that followed were a lesson in quiet panic. The first bill I couldn't pay was the electricity, The notice came, a cheerful red slip of paper that felt like a death sentence. I sat in the dark that evening, a single candle flickering on the coffee table, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The shadows looked like grasping hands reaching for me. I started eating less. An apple for breakfast, a can of soup for dinner, watered down to make it last 2 nights. I told myself it was a diet, a healthy choice, but the gnawing in my stomach was a constant, physical reminder of my fear. The shame was a weight in my chest, making it hard to breathe. I was 71 years old, a widow, and suddenly a pauper. Mark and Chloe didn't call. I imagined them in their beautiful, modern house, the one they'd bought with a down payment I'd proudly helped them with, eating gourmet meals, laughing, talking about their investment. Did they ever think of me? Did Mark, my son, ever picture his mother sitting in the dark, cold creeping in through the window frames, wondering how she was going to afford her next refill of heart medication? The thought was a fresh stab of pain, sharper than any before. It wasn't just the money. It was the sheer, callous indifference. They had unplugged me from my own life and walked away without a backward glance. My grandson, Leo, was the only one who came. He showed up one afternoon, his lanky teenage frame hesitating in the doorway as if asking permission to enter the space of my misery. He was a quiet boy, always had been. He preferred the steady logic of books and computers to the messy unpredictability of people. And he often seemed to hover at the edge of family gatherings, an observer rather than a participant. His mother, Mark's first wife, Sarah, had been much the same, gentle and unassuming. The divorce had hit Leo hard, forcing him even further into his shell. "Grandma?" he asked, his voice soft, cracking slightly. "Are you okay?" "The house is cold." He held out a paper bag, the logo of the grocery store where he worked part-time printed on the side. "I brought you some groceries." "From my allowance." My eyes welled up, hot and sudden. This sweet, timid boy with his part-time job bagging groceries was trying to take care of me when his own father wouldn't. I pulled him into a fierce hug, my tears soaking the shoulder of his worn hoodie. He just stood there, patting my back awkwardly, a silent, steady presence in my crumbling world. As I put the groceries away, real food, like bread and cheese and a small carton of milk that felt like a luxury, Leo wandered into the living room. He didn't speak, but I could feel his eyes on me. He saw the stack of unpaid bills on the counter. He saw the single candle stub. He saw the fear I was trying so hard to hide behind a brittle smile. He sat down at the small desk in the corner where my old desktop computer sat, unused for years, covered in a fine layer of dust. "Can I turn this on, Grandma?" "I want to check something." I nodded, too tired and heartsick to ask what. The familiar whir and hum of the old machine filled the silence, a sound from a different, safer time. A time when my husband, Richard, was still alive and our family felt unbreakable. I thought back to Richard, to his steady, reassuring presence. He was a good man, a hard worker, a rock. He'd always handled the finances, patting my hand and telling me not to worry my pretty little head about it. "I'll always take care of you, Alara," he'd promised 1,000 times. And he had. Until the day he collapsed on the 18th hole of the golf course, his heart giving out without any warning. He had left me with the house, paid in full, and a pension that was supposed to be my security blanket for the rest of my days. A blanket my own son had ripped away and given to a stranger. But as I sat there, watching Leo's silhouette against the computer screen, a strange, half-forgotten memory surfaced, prickling at the edges of my mind. It was from years ago, maybe 10 years before Richard died. A phone call he'd taken in his study, the door cracked open just enough for me to hear. His voice had been low and tense, not angry, but strained, like a rope pulled taut. I'd heard him say, "The payments will continue as long as I'm able. It's a promise I have to keep. Don't call me here again." When I'd asked him about it later, he'd waved it away with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just a business thing, honey." A long-term commitment. I had trusted him, so I let it go. Now, in the cold, silent house, that memory felt different. It felt like a loose thread on a perfectly woven tapestry. A thread that, if pulled, might unravel everything. A week later, Chloe appeared at my door. She held a bouquet of cheap, grocery store carnations, their aggressively bright pink color an insult to the grayness of my life. She swept into my house as if she owned it, her expensive perfume cloying and artificial, instantly filling the small space. Alara, I'm so sorry we haven't been by. We've been ridiculously busy getting the boutique off the ground. It's all so exciting. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were like a shark's, flat, black, and assessing. She looked around my living room, her gaze lingering on the faded furniture and the worn rug with an air of faint disgust. I felt a hot flush of shame, as if my modest, clean home was a personal failing. Mark told me you were a little worried about the money, she said, her voice dripping with a fake sympathy that made my skin crawl. Please, don't be. This is going to be huge. We'll all be set for life. You just have to be a little patient. Patient? The word escaped me in a choked whisper. Chloe, I don't have time to be patient. I have bills. I have to eat. She waved a dismissive hand, the large diamond on her finger catching the dim light and throwing a cruel little rainbow on the wall. Oh, don't be so dramatic. We can help you out with a little something to tide you over. The offer was more insulting than the theft itself. She wasn't offering help. She was offering a handout, scraps from my own table. As she spoke, my eyes were drawn to a piece of jewelry around her neck. It was a silver locket, oval-shaped with intricate engravings of what looked like vines. It wasn't flashy like the rest of her jewelry. It looked old, personal. I'd never seen it before, and for some reason, it sent a chill down my spine. It felt out of place on her, like it belonged to someone else's story. Leo continued his quiet visits. He never mentioned the money directly, but I knew it was a constant hum beneath the surface of his thoughts. He'd bring me a sandwich from the deli, or just sit and do his homework at my kitchen table while I pretended to read a book, the same page over and over. He spent most of his time on the old computer, telling me he was trying to digitize my old photo albums for me. It seemed like a sweet, harmless project, a way for him to feel useful, so I let him be. I didn't realize he wasn't looking at pictures of his own childhood. He was digging into the past. He was looking for a ghost. One afternoon, he called me over to the computer, his voice tight with an urgency I'd never heard from him before. Grandma, look what I found. On the screen was a picture of me and Richard on our wedding day. I smiled, a genuine smile for the first time in weeks. We were so young, I murmured, reaching out to touch the screen. Yeah, Leo said, his eyes still glued to the monitor. Grandpa saved everything. Every email, every document. All his files are on here. It's like a time capsule. His finger hovered over a folder named RF. Holdings. What's this? I shrugged. I have no idea. Richard had all sorts of business things I never understood. RF. Holdings. The name meant nothing to me. But Leo's expression was intense. His jaw was set. He was a bloodhound who had caught a scent. He was no longer the timid boy who hid behind books. He was a protector, and he was on the hunt. The quiet clicks of his mouse were becoming the drumbeat of a coming war. The eviction notice was the final blow. It came taped to my front door, a stark, official document in a plastic sleeve, screaming my failure to the world. I had 30 days to pay 3 months of back property taxes, or the home Richard and I had built, the only home I had ever known, would be seized by the county. The floor seemed to fall away beneath me. I sank into a kitchen chair, the notice trembling in my hand, the legalistic words blurring into an incomprehensible threat. This was it. This was the end of the line. Fueled by a terror that burned away my shame and grief, I called Mark. I told him to meet me. Not at my house, not at his. A public place. A small, neutral coffee shop downtown where we couldn't hide from the truth. When he arrived, Chloe was with him, her arm linked through his, a defiant smirk playing on her lips. Her presence was a declaration. We are a united front. You are the outsider. I laid the eviction notice on the table between us. It landed with a soft, final thud. The house, Mark, I said, my voice shaking with a rage I didn't know I possessed. They're going to take my house. Mark went pale. He reached for the notice, but Chloe placed her manicured hand over his, stopping him. Now, Alara, let's not get hysterical, she said, her tone condescending, as if speaking to a difficult child. It's just a cash flow problem. The boutique is about to launch its first collection. The money will start pouring in any day now. Any day now isn't good enough, I snapped, my voice rising, causing a few people at nearby tables to look over. I am losing my home. The home you grew up in. Do you understand what you've done? Mark wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the scarred wooden table, a picture of abject misery. He was a puppet, and I could see the strings leading right to the woman beside him. It was Chloe who spoke, her voice turning cold and hard, all pretense of sympathy gone. We are all a family, Alara. And sometimes families have to make sacrifices for the greater good. You've lived a comfortable life. It's her turn now. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it stole my breath. The greater good was her good. My sacrifice was her gain. Mark just sat there, silent, his betrayal a deafening roar in the small coffee shop. I got up and walked out, leaving them there with my shattered life sitting on the table between them. If you're just joining us, you need to subscribe now. The secret my grandson is about to uncover will change everything you think you know about this family. You won't believe the twist that's coming. That night, Leo came over. I was packing a box, starting with the old photo albums. My hands were slow, my movements robotic. Each picture of Mark as a baby, of Richard laughing on a beach, felt like a memory I was burying. Leo watched me for a long time, his face grim, before he spoke. I got in, Grandma. I looked up, my mind foggy with despair. Got in where, honey? Into Grandpa's hidden files, he said, his voice low and serious. The RF Holdings folder. It was password protected, but I figured it out. It was your wedding anniversary. My heart skipped a beat. Of course it was. Richard had been a man of sentimental habits. Leo turned his laptop toward me. The screen was filled with spreadsheets, financial records going back decades. Look at this, he said, pointing to a recurring line item. A payment. $5,000 every single month, wired to an account under the name A. Du Bois. The payments were like clockwork for 20 years. And then, a month after Grandpa Richard died, they stopped. A. Du Bois? I whispered, the name of foreign, ugly sound on my tongue. I don't know anyone by that name. I know, Leo said, his eyes dark with a sorrow that seemed too old for his years. I did some digging. There were emails, too. To the same person. They weren't love letters, Grandma. They were tense. Arguing about money, about promises. He opened another file. It was a photograph. A digital copy of an old, slightly faded print. My breath caught in my throat. It was Richard, looking impossibly young, maybe in his early 30s, his hair thicker, his smile wider. He was standing on a porch of a house I didn't recognize, his arm around a woman I had never seen before. A pretty brunette with sad, shadowed eyes. And standing in front of them, holding Richard's hand, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 5 or 6, a little girl with dark, serious eyes, an unsmiling mouth, and a silver, vine-engraved locket around her neck. My world stopped turning. The locket. It was the exact same one Chloe wore. The one that had seemed so out of place. I stared at the image, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. The little girl in the picture, her face a perfect miniature of the woman who had destroyed my life. Chloe. The sad-eyed woman, her hand resting on my husband's arm with an air of tired ownership. And Richard, my Richard, smiling a smile I didn't recognize, a smile from a secret life I never knew he had. The box of photos slipped from my hands, scattering 4 decades of happy memories across the floor. But they weren't the only memories anymore. There was a whole other story, a whole other family that had been living in the shadows of my own. The payments, the secret phone calls, the long-term commitment. It all crashed down on me at once, a tidal wave of deceit. Richard didn't have a business secret. He had another life. He had another daughter. Leo, I whispered, my voice hoarse, raw. Get your coat. We're going to your father's house. The time for sitting in the dark was over. The time for quiet grief was over. A storm was coming, and I was going to be the lightning. The drive to Mark and Chloe's house was a blur. My mind was a whirlwind of images, colliding and shattering. Richard's secret smile, Chloe's predatory one, the eviction notice on my door, the little girl in the locket. Betrayal wasn't a strong enough word. This was a desecration. A lie that had hollowed out my entire adult life. Leo sat beside me in the passenger's seat, silent, his laptop clutched in his hands like a weapon. He was no longer a timid boy. He was an avenger. When we arrived, they were in the middle of dinner. Through the large picture window, we could see them at their dining table, the scene bathed in warm, intimate light. The smell of roasted chicken hung in the air, a sickeningly domestic scent. They looked up, surprised, as we walked in without knocking. Mark started to rise, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. "Mom? What are you doing here?" "We're here for the truth," I said, my voice as cold and hard as the granite countertops in their designer kitchen. Chloe let out an exasperated sigh, dabbing her mouth with a cloth napkin. "Alara, we've been over this. The investment is sound. You're just going to have to." "I'm not talking about your fake boutique, Chloe," I cut her off, my gaze locking with hers. "I'm talking about this." Leo stepped forward and placed the laptop on the dining room table, right next to their half-eaten dinner. He turned the screen to face them. The photograph of Richard, the strange woman, and the little girl glowed in the dim light. I watched Chloe's face. The color drained from it instantly. Her fork clattered onto her plate, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. The mask of confident, charming ambition fell away, and for the first time, I saw the desperate, haunted woman underneath. "Where did you get that?" she whispered, her eyes wide with a feral panic. "From Grandpa's computer," Leo said, his voice steady and clear, devoid of any youthful tremor. "From the same files that show him sending $5,000 a month to a woman named Annette Dubois for 20 years. Your mother, I'm guessing." Silence. Mark stared at the screen, then at Chloe, his face a canvas of utter confusion. He didn't know. My son was a fool and a traitor, but he wasn't in on this part of the secret. I was sure of it. "That's you, isn't it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, pointing a trembling finger at the little girl in the photo. "Chloe Dubois. That's your real name, isn't it?" Chloe finally broke. A sob tore from her throat, a raw, ugly sound of a lifetime of secrets being ripped into the open. The dam of her lies burst, and the truth came flooding out. "Yes," she cried, burying her face in her hands. "Yes, it's me. Richard was her father. He'd had an affair with her mother, a secretary at his firm, decades ago. He'd never married her, never publicly acknowledged them, but he had supported them. He had paid for their house, for Chloe's schooling, for everything. He was a weekend father, a ghost in their lives, but he was all they had. When he died, everything stopped," she choked out, tears streaming down her face, making paths through her expensive makeup. "The money was gone. My mother. She's sick. She needs constant care. We were going to lose our home, the one he bought for us. I tried to contact his lawyers, but there was no will, no provision for us. We were nothing. We were his dirty little secret, erased the moment he died." She looked up at me, her eyes blazing with a lifetime of resentment and pain. "I found Mark. I sought him out. I found out who he was. And I saw a way to get back what was ours. The money he promised we would always have. Your pension. It was almost the exact amount he still owed us on our mortgage. I wasn't just stealing. I was taking back what my father promised me." I stumbled back, leaning against the wall for support, the cool plaster a shock against my skin. My entire marriage, my 45 years with Richard, flickered before my eyes like a faulty film reel. The business trips, the late nights at the office, the unexplained expenses he'd brushed off. It was all a lie. He hadn't been building a life just for me. He had been maintaining two. The man I had loved and mourned was a stranger. The foundation of my life wasn't stone. It was quicksand. Then the final, devastating blow landed. Mark, who had been sitting in stunned, horrified silence, finally spoke. His voice was hollow, dead. "I knew," he said. He didn't look at me. He looked at Chloe. She told me. Before we took the money, she told me everything. The air left my lungs in a silent whoosh. The world went black at the edges. What? I didn't know what to do, he stammered, finally turning to me, his eyes pleading for an absolution I could never give. "I found out my dad, my hero, was a liar. He had a whole other family, and Chloe, she's my sister. My half-sister. She and her mom were about to be on the street. I was so ashamed of what Dad did. So guilty. I felt like I had to fix it. I had to honor his promise, even if it meant betraying me. His living, breathing mother. He chose to protect the legacy of a dead liar and help a stranger he was related to by blood over the woman who had given him life. The betrayal was absolute. It was a knife not in my back, but straight through my heart, wielded by the two people I should have been able to trust the most. My son and my husband. I didn't scream. I didn't faint. I simply collapsed inward, the weight of a 50-year lie crushing the very soul of me. The money was gone. My husband was a stranger. And my son was lost to me. I had nothing left. The weeks that followed were lived in a fog. The truth didn't set me free. It imprisoned me in a new kind of hell, one where every memory was tainted. Every laugh with Richard now seemed hollow, every anniversary a performance. I went through the motions of living, but I was hollowed out. The anger and the grief were a constant, churning sea inside me. Leo was my anchor. He made sure I ate. He talked to the people at the county office, explaining the situation of fraud, buying me precious time with the house. He was the only solid thing in my life. One day, there was a knock on the door. It was Mark. He stood on my porch, looking 10 years older, with dark circles under his eyes. He was alone. I almost shut the door in his face, but the raw, abject brokenness in his eyes stopped me. He didn't try to make excuses. He just handed me a cashier's check. It was for $20,000. I sold my car, he said, his voice thick with unshed tears. It's a start. I'm going to get a second job. I will pay you back every single cent, Mom. Even if it takes me the rest of my life. What I did. It was unforgivable. I chose a secret over you. I am so sorry. It wasn't enough, but it was something. It was the first crack of light in a long, dark tunnel. He told me Chloe had moved out. Their relationship, built on a foundation of secrets and lies, couldn't survive the explosive truth. She had gone to take care of her mother, using the last of my pension money to get them into a small, clean apartment and pay for her mother's immediate medical care. The online boutique had never existed. A month later, I did something I never thought I would do. I asked Leo to drive me to an address on the other side of town. It was a small, rundown apartment complex with peeling paint. I walked up to the second floor and knocked on the door. Chloe answered. She looked pale and tired, the designer clothes replaced by a simple sweatshirt and jeans. There was no fight left in her eyes, only a deep, weary sadness. Behind her, I could see a frail, gray-haired woman lying in a hospital bed set up in the tiny living room. Annette Dubois, Richard's other love. She looked at me, her eyes clouded with sickness but still sharp with intelligence. She knew who I was. In her face, I saw traces of Chloe, and in Chloe's, I saw the ghost of my husband. I didn't go there to forgive. I went there to understand. I looked at their small, sparse apartment, at the bottles of medicine on the nightstand, at the desperation that hung in the air like dust. This was the legacy of my husband's secret. Two families, both broken by his choices. Chloe wasn't a monster. She was a daughter, just as desperate to care for her mother as Mark should have been to care for me. I didn't say much. I just stood there, taking it all in. I saw the faded photograph from Leo's laptop, now in a cheap frame on the wall. Richard, Annette, and little Chloe. A family portrait from a life I never knew. As I turned to leave, I looked at Chloe. He should have told me, I said, the words feeling heavy and inadequate. We could have figured it out. He made us all strangers. She simply nodded, a single tear rolling down her cheek. The road back has been long. Mark is paying me back, slowly but steadily. He visits every week, not with false cheer, but with a quiet humility. We are rebuilding, brick by painful brick. My relationship with Leo is the truest thing in my life. My timid grandson, who found the courage to search for a truth no one else wanted to see, saved me. He didn't just find the money. He found the story, and in an odd way, the story gave me back a piece of myself. I will never see my husband, Richard, the same way again. The love is still there, buried under layers of sorrow, but it's intertwined with a profound and lasting wound. Families are more complicated than we ever want them to be. They are built on love and sacrifice, but they are also haunted by secrets and the ghosts of choices made long ago. My wound is deep, but I am learning that even the most shattered things can be put back together. They may not look the same, the cracks will always show, but they can still hold a future. Which part of this story left you the most speechless? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching.